Well, a lot of times it's not just asking, who's at fault. Sometimes you just got to fix the problem, then go back and say, okay, who was at fault later, if that even has any bearing on the situation at all.
Right. I mean, my management style, and it's probably not always well received, but like if I'm in this room, this is next to my office, if I'm in this room and the door is closed, I may want to know who's at fault, and I may be very pointed. I'm not going to do that in public. I'm only going to support because everyone here deserves support. People here work their tails off. They're very smart. They're very hardworking. But sometimes if you don't call each other out, particularly in a relatively safe setting, nothing changes. So I would advise that, board members, I don't see you insulting your superintendent in public, but I think there's a point where when there is an evaluation, it can't just be, I like the way you dress. How's the student achievement going? That's got to be the prime thing anymore. And it doesn't have to be raw scores. I mean, are you going in the right direction? I mean, there's some schools that are going to be on this list that I mentioned that have higher scores than other schools, but they're sinking like a rock over the last 3 years, where another school that might have some lower scores is going the right direction on student achievement. Well, that deserves to be rewarded.
Now, here in Michigan, we have a rich history of having labor unions. Are you finding that the unions involved with education here in Michigan are stepping up to the plate to be real partners in the changes and the things that you've been talking about today?
Well, I have a mixed answer on that, which will probably get me in some hot water here. I mean, I really want to and genuinely want to thank both the MEA and the MFT for working together on Race to the Top. I mean, we have an application in yesterday. I feel pretty good about it. They definitely worked as a team. I think I didn't do as good a job as I could have the first time on that, and I think we've done better. That's the good side. The bad side is there's some things that because we decided to do it by consensus, knowing the unions wouldn't agree to some things, we don't have as strong a proposal. And that's just the fact. It doesn't mean it's wrong. I mean, they're trying to protect interests as they see them. But I'll give you an example. I know of a situation where, and I want to say this up front, if we didn't have unions, educators would have been taken advantage of for the last 30 years like we were in the 50s. It's just a fact. On the other hand, to have a district not far from you where there's no copay on the health insurance, you got to be kidding me in this day and age. And then also at a point where you're not willing to have part of your evaluation based on student achievement, these are just things that aren't smart to fight. And then the one I was leading up to is a specific example where I think seniority makes sense for saving a job. There's no reason a 20-year teacher should leave. Having said that, I know a situation where a teacher that was teaching language is bumped into non-language instruction and bumped out by a 20-year teacher who technically has the cert, but it's been so long, doesn't even have the facility of the language anymore, and that person's teaching language. We're just putting a gun to our head as educators. This is insane. So the bigger question about unions, hey, it takes two. If we're agreeing to contracts like that, then the board, then the superintendent, then the unions are all equally responsible. But you got to get smarter about what these contracts need to be like that protect people fairly, but not go so overboard that they don't pass a smell test.
Sure. Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been 16 years since we had Proposal A in Michigan to change how schools are funding, and here we are 16 years later, and we're still struggling. If you could kind of rewrite or wave your magic wand, I guess, so to speak, to change, what would you change to help stabilize that for Michigan and for Michigan students?
I actually believe, and I can't wave my wand, if the auto industry hadn't collapsed and we could have funded education, the proposal's pretty good. It was moving districts closer together in terms of reducing the gap. If it was fully funded, it's a pretty good formula. It's not perfect. But we weren't able to fund it, so probably something else needs to be looked at. The only specific thing I would add to that is we should be taxing services. I mean, we need to do reforms. I'm a proponent of reforms and cost cutting and fair, taking our fair share of, as I said earlier, of co-pays on insurance and stuff on the one side. But on the other side, part of the answer does have to be revenue too. And it just can't be that everyone who runs for office is so scared to say taxes that they don't realize it is part of the solution. And I think a fair way to do it is you pay taxes if you play a round of golf. I mean, it's not that big a deal. If you can afford to play a round of golf, you should be able to pay some taxes on it.
Okay. Just as our time's just about up, just give us a quick glimpse of what Michael Flanagan's vision is for public education in Michigan.
I mean, it's not really that lofty. If I could do a visual right now, I'd have a picture of my granddaughter behind me, which I've done at some events lately, and just said that if there's a classroom in this state or a school in this state that I wouldn't want her to attend, then no kid should attend that school. Mm-hmm. And now that we have law to back that up, we're going to be serious about it and take it seriously. We will close them. Good. I mean, they either have to improve. You just can't have virtually the same neighborhoods, in some cases the same neighborhoods for 50 years, mm-hmm. that are failing their kids. New principals, new whatever, it's got to turn around. So the vision, it's not that sexy, I guess, but it's just that all of our kids have to reach higher level achievement. It's got to be much more centered around them and not adults. And then I think if we support teachers in their training, as you said earlier, if they embrace accountability along with administrators and the rest of us, we'll be fine. But I think if you can personalize it, and if I could ask all of your viewers to think about some, granddaughter type analogy they may have, mm-hmm. and what do you want for them, you need to want for every kid in the state. It's just that simple.
Okay. Now we're into summer vacation, and obviously for educators, that just means we're now preparing for the next school year. What do you see coming up for the 2010-2011 school year, and what you're looking forward to seeing happen next year in Michigan schools?
I just, first of all, the funding stabilized a bit. That was good news last week for schools. It's not for the general fund. The department's going to get cut again, but it's good for the K-12 community. And I think we need to obsess less about the money, realize we're still a pretty well-funded state. We got to have $1 billion a grade, and we need to focus on the students and their achievement and make that the highest priority. And if we start doing that next year, we'll be in good shape. If we don't, there's some schools that are really going to be suffering pretty severe consequences now that these new laws are in place. But I don't think they get there. Our goal in the department is not to take over one school. Mm-hmm. It's to set a standard and help them improve, but be ready to take them over if they just won't, if they're not doing it. Okay, and I'm quite confident they're going to step up to this because, those of us in this profession, we want to do the right thing. It's not like anyone's out there saying, let me teach in a classroom or be a principal and fail. But we need to do it with results in mind and be accountable for that. Okay.
Michael Flanagan, the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the state of Michigan, we want to thank you so much for being our guest this month on Dateline Schools.
Pleasure to be on Dateline. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you very much, and we want to thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again soon on Dateline Schools.